You're listening to the Journey podcast. Can the wounds that broke you become the cracks that let the light in? Find out more in today's episode. This episode contains adult subject matter, and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Journey Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we explore the journey of recovering from trauma with our guest, who shares his personal experience of navigating a life-altering event. We delve into the emotional and psychological impacts of trauma and the complex path towards healing and rebuilding one's life. Our conversation sheds light on the resilience of the human spirit and the various methods and strategies that can support individuals in their recovery process. Join us as we discuss the importance of seeking support, embracing vulnerability, and finding strength in the face of adversity. Jacques Delorme is a science educator, public speaker, life coach, and author of Driving Out of Darkness, Self-Care Strategies for Trauma Recovery. He has dedicated the past 12 years of his life to personal development, including multiple training courses. His deep interest in public speaking and support programs using the concepts taught in his book will help anyone recovering from trauma, dealing with someone who is, or for those looking to create daily strategies to calm their mind. Here is my interview with Jacques Delorme. Hi, Jacques. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because recovering from trauma is such a profound and very needed space that we need to talk about today. So thank you for coming here and wanting to share your story today, and welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here early in my morning.
Yes, it's very early for you. And that's part of the appreciation that you're here today. So you got up very early to join me today. And would you like to share a little bit about yourself? And obviously a big part of that is the story that you have come here to tell, and share with our listeners what that story is and where you have been and what has happened.
My background is in education. I'm a high school science teacher, chemistry and physics mostly, and I work higher level education now in curriculum and assessment. And one of the things I started doing is dabbling into the real estate world. And as a part of that, I got a real estate coach that was quite a ways east of us here. I'm in Canada in the prairies. And I was traveling into another province to go visit with my real estate coach. This is October of 2022, so it's COVID era. So I'm driving along and it's getting dark. It's 8:00 at night, Manitoba time, and moonless night. And I'm looking to try to find some food. So on the left side of the highway, across a double lane, is a gas station in the middle of nowhere, no town nearby. And I'm looking to try to stop in and grab a sandwich, grab something to snack on. Lights are on, no cars, nobody walking around, and being COVID, it's everything shut down at 7:00 in my province. So I'm thinking there's probably nobody there because it's closed. The lights on, it's just for security. So I thought, okay, I'll just keep going, get to the next town, no big deal. The highway curves to the right and slightly downhill at this point. I get partway around the curve and I never saw him. I'm driving 120 kilometers an hour and I hit a cyclist on a pedal bike in the middle of my lane. 24-year-old guy from a nearby city. Never saw him in time. Couldn't swerve. Hit him dead center of my car. Full speed. His body comes up over the hood, smashes into my windshield, bounces up and over, lands somewhere in the highway behind me. My windshield's destroyed. I have no way of seeing where I'm going. So I use the left-hand side of the road to figure out, well, okay, I'd not hit the ditch. Pull over, hit my flashing lights, my warning lights, and call 911. Talk with her for a little bit. I'm uninjured. The windshield smashed, but other than that, there's nothing that came into my car. The airbags didn't go off, nothing. I was perfectly fine. So I have my emergency first aid. So the thought is, okay, let's go back and see if we can help this guy. So I'm heading back. It's moonless night, so it's really, really dark. I get a little bit of light from the gas station, maybe a quarter mile back at this point. So I just is able to see where he is. He's along the dash line in the middle of the highway. I'm on the side of the highway, and I can't go out there. This is the high-speed highway. It's 110 kilometers an hour. I was speeding a little bit, obviously. And people are normally driving 110, 120 on this highway. So if I don't see him, they're not going to see me. So I stay where I am. And good thing I did, less than a minute from the time that I got there, SUV comes around the curve. Okay, I'm waving, flag them down, get them to stop. They don't see me and they don't see him. And they run over him right in front of me, going full speed. Thanks to the laws of physics, his body gets flipped in the air and gets shot down the highway like an arrow following behind the vehicle, about 7 feet in the air and 50 feet down the highway. Just launches him. Body lands, rolls, comes across the right-hand lane. The vehicle itself braked for about 2-3 seconds and left. They never stayed. They panicked and they left. I'm in shock at this point. I'm walking towards my car, just kind of aimlessly walking. And we decide that, yeah, it's time I got back to my car. The vehicle tries to swerve to miss him and ended up hitting me. So I'm walking back towards my car. There's nothing I can do for him. If my collision didn't kill him, that absolutely would have. There's no clearance in an SUV for a human body. So there's no way that he survived that. Not a minute goes by, huge set of lights and a lot of noise come from behind me. It's a semi with a flatbed trailer. And the body right now is in the right-hand lane. So there's no way he's going to avoid it. I'm waving my hands. I'm screaming, trying to get him to warn him that there's something in the highway. Doesn't matter. And he hits driver's side tires across the pelvis of his body and runs over him. So at this point, there's been 3 consecutive collisions with his body. And yeah, it's time that I just get away. So I got back to my car, got in and just waited for the police to arrive. Eventually they do. I give my report and everything. I get one small cut on my hand from putting my car in park. I'd grab glass from the shattered windshield. Other than that, I'm perfectly fine. Just the emotional turmoil now starts. And that starts the whole journey of trying to deal with what I saw, deal with what I heard over the next several months of trying to go through a recovery.
Yeah. Thank you, Jacques, for sharing that story with us. And I'm going to give you just a moment to breathe, because I would imagine that this is a story that you've probably at this point told several times to many different people. But when you tell it, I can feel that you are still feeling that and you are still living that. So we'll take a breather for just a moment, and I'll kind of go back to what you just talked about, and that is that you were physically all right and you just had a small cut, but all of what followed from that incident, from that accident on the highway, that I would imagine completely changed your life, changed who you were from before that accident to after that accident. Because something like that, it will impact you not just on a physical level with broken bones, but also on a mental, emotional, and every other level that then makes changes. So after that accident, and you probably continued home, did you get any psychological support? Did you receive any counseling after, any therapy after? Or how did your story continue after that horrific night where you had that accident?
My car was undrivable. So I am over 4 hours from home driving and without a vehicle. So my parents are partway towards Manitoba in Saskatchewan. So they came and got me the next day at 1:00 in the afternoon. This happened on a Wednesday night. They came and got me on a Thursday after lunch. So I spent that entire time in a city I've never been in, completely alone. People worked during the day, and I did what most men will do, and I go into my little shell because I didn't know how to deal with what I just seen. I spent some time meditating, doing my personal journaling and stuff that I had kind of started at that point. I'd been through some personal development, but I really didn't know how to use a lot of that for a situation like this. So I'm still learning. So I'm looking for help. So I talked to a couple of friends. One's a police officer, so that helped with that portion because I didn't know if I was in trouble. Just killed somebody on a highway. I didn't know if I was going to go to jail. Turns out I wasn't charged with anything. It's just as an unfortunate accident, and that's where they left it. I was able to make my way home. Had to go back through the crash site on the way back because it was west of the city I was in. That was difficult. Yeah, I kind of shut my eyes and kind of avoided looking at too much and just got through it, got home. I did reach out to the healthcare provider that I have through work to try to get help. My phone call lasted not very long because they go, we'll see you next Thursday. And when you go through something as traumatic, you need help and you want it now. I needed it that day, not a week from now. So I mentioned that to them. They said, well, if somebody's got time, they'll reach out to you possibly today, maybe tomorrow, maybe day after. We'll see. That was the response I got. 5 hours after I'd called, I got a phone call from a young lady, seemed like a younger voice, female. And we started talking, and she tries to placate me like I am a 5-year-old. It's okay. It's all right. You'll be okay. This soft, soothing voice, and like you're treating a little child. Unfortunately, I'm in my 50s and I'm male, and I'm not going to react to that very well. And I didn't. I shut down pretty quickly. The conversation didn't last very long. I couldn't open up to her because I kept getting the same sort of response that wasn't helping. I was able to talk about what happened, but she wasn't helping me try to work out in my own brain, what was this doing to me? What do I need to do to get better? And it wasn't helping. I eventually left that conversation, never went back to her again. That healthcare provider eventually got me someone else. A couple of weeks, 3 weeks later, I talked to another gentleman that helped some, but I really didn't use that avenue. It wasn't helping me. I saw a psychologist for a little while. I saw a life coach who actually is trained in neuro-linguistic programming. That helped the most, and being able to go through what I had experienced and try to detach it from my central nervous system. Every time you have a bad memory, you have a connection that your psychological will connect to your physical. That was my major issue. I'm on a stress level of about a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm on a 7 constantly every single day because of it. And my brain just won't shut down. My brain's in overdrive, doing the what ifs. What if I had left sooner and been through that stretch of highway in the daylight? What if I'd stopped for food? What if, well, all the what ifs in the world do nothing. You have to be able to get past that and do the what now, not the what if. So my what now is, okay, what do I do to try to stop this from affecting me so badly? Because every little trigger during my day, anything at all, sets me up to a stress level of 10, and I can't function. I'm having trouble. So by using neuro-linguistic programming, I was able to find a way of detaching the emotional from the physical, so that when I have a trigger that happens, I don't have myself transported back to the accident, having the same physical reaction every single time. So I get this knot in my sternum, in my chest, that won't go away. It's that stress ball that some people call it, that won't go away. And every time it hits, I just want to get away from people. I want to hide. I want to go home and just be alone. And that, for me, was going to be dangerous. I've experienced the suicidal thoughts and everything from stress in my life 10 years ago. I don't want to go back there. So I knew I had to do something. So that helped a lot, getting help from that perspective. Psychologists helped for a little while, but it's problematic and it's extremely expensive. Anywhere from $175 to $250 an hour. My healthcare provides $400 total for the year. So yeah, it's not going to help very long before it becomes very expensive. So I needed to find a way of helping myself. I can go to counseling. I can get that free counseling piece. You can get through some organizations within your area. In Canada, for Saskatchewan, there's some public ones you can get to. Very difficult because of post-COVID. So many people are struggling that counseling was very difficult to get into. And it's only going to help you one day a week or one day every 2 weeks. What about all the other days? Now what? So I started to learn strategies to get better myself on a daily basis. That slowly over time, as I use things like mindfulness and meditation and journaling, as I'd mentioned, as I kept using those, I was able to slowly start to learn how to control my mind, how to control my reaction to triggers. That was my biggest issue.
That's really interesting that you mentioned that because yes, the counseling is such a very short time out of all of these hours that you need to pass every single day. It's such a short span of support. So you actually went and tried to find things that would support you these other 23 hours of the day where you didn't have any counseling available. And how did that work with your workplace, with your family relationships, with your friends? If I kind of put myself in that situation, I might have a hard time understanding how you feel if I haven't been through that same situation. How did that impact your relationships at your workplace, with your family, with your friends? Were they able to be supportive for you? Or did you find that there was a gap where they couldn't connect to what had happened to you?
That's where I do a lot of my public speaking, a lot of my talks talk about men's mental health. Men and women react very differently to stressors, especially something as traumatic as what I went through. One of the things you will find is that women will tend to open up, trying to reach out. They're very emotion based, whereas men have this whole alpha male mentality that society has thrown on us for years. The John Wayne, the James Bond, that even portrayed in movies, where men are to be stoic. They're never emotional. Men never cry. You suck it up and you be the man. And that mentality is dangerous. We look at the suicide rate, 80% of suicides are men. Well, why is that happening? Well, you take a look at research and a lot of what we've seen now within the last few years, men don't talk, and that's part of the problem. We have no release for that energy, that negative pent up emotion that we have, that stress doesn't ever get released. If you don't release that, it eats you up. And that's why the suicide rate's so high. One of the things that I found is I did exactly that. I went into my little cave, went into my little hole, and I wouldn't come out. I didn't tell anybody. My biggest fear was being judged. My biggest fear is being labeled a killer. And I couldn't deal with that. And I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody at work. Nobody at work knew. My boss knew because needed to. I was off for the first week. I was back at work within a week because it was my safe haven. If I needed somebody to talk to, I could leave my cubicle at work. I'm in cubicle land, as they call it. I'm in a cubicle. I could stay in my cubicle and people would leave me alone, no problem. I spend most of my day working on my own stuff, where I could break down in tears at my desk, no problem, which happened numerous times, especially in the first couple of months, where I just get overwhelmed. I could be at my desk, be isolated, and not have anybody see that. And no one did. I was able to hide that very well. But at the same time, if I needed somebody to talk to, so it's just to reach out, just something as innocent as go ask somebody a question, just get a human contact during my day, I had that. So being at work was more of a safe haven than being at home. Being at home, I am literally alone. I have my kids half time being divorced, but my kids are at school. So what do I do with my whole day? I'm isolated completely, I say, unless I get on the phone with someone. So I needed work to be in my little safe haven, but I didn't tell anybody. Nobody at work knew much of anything other than I have a very select few people I trusted. Even in my family, my friends, nobody knew. It took almost 10 months, about a year, before I started to tell my story, started to tell people that something had happened. A lot of people to this day still don't know that are part of my life. They don't know. I'm getting that around. It's getting better. I wrote a book about it, so obviously it's very public now, and I do a lot of this. But for the longest time, I stayed hidden. I stayed quiet. And that's very much a male trait, I guess we can call it. And that's what I've tried to get men to understand, is that it is okay to reach out. It is okay to talk. If you're not willing to do that with people that you know, do it with people who understand where you're coming from. I've joined a men's group. I have two of them I've joined. I'm going to be starting my own men's group to say it is okay to say you're not okay, and be able to reach out to others who understand where you're at and aren't going to judge you because we are where you are. going through a divorce, going through a trauma, going through those really stressful things that can happen in your life can eat you up, and you need to be able to talk. And that's one of the bigger messages I have is that, okay, reach out to someone, talk to somebody that you trust. Because if you don't, it will eat you up and it can cause you some significant issues.
Yeah. And then we come to possibly even the suicide rate that you talked about.
Yeah.
So it many times doesn't end very well at all. So thank you for sharing that and your perspective and what you went through. I feel like that will be very helpful for listeners, and especially those listeners who are men and who may be struggling with something that they fear they might be judged for, or there might be some stigma around that in their family, their friends, and society. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm curious, what made you eventually talk about this? What made you speak out about that and share that? Was there anything in particular that happened or that made you want to go out and share that at some point?
I got to the point in my personal development journey. I've been in personal development since 2011, 2012, when I started. So I've been in a long time, and understood that for me, I don't want something to happen that is so very negative within my life. I want to be able to use that for something positive. And there had to be a reason of why I went through this. I firmly believe that everything that happens happened for a purpose. For me, because I come from a teaching background, I also have this ability to communicate with people and to be able to teach them things that I know, having been in a classroom for 16 years and done a number of other things within my life. I looked at it and went, okay, so I've gotten to this point where I'm now more comfortable with what happened. What do I do with it? So I wrote a book. So 10 months after the accident, I started writing. I got through it really quickly. From writing a book perspective, it was very quick. It took me less than 2 months and it was written. I was able to get through the writing process, get it edited. I self-published, which made it significantly easier. I started the end of August. Couple of months in, I had that kind of put together, did the editing into November, into December, got the publishing piece kind of put together, had it up on Amazon by the 1st of February, and it was out. Now my story's live. Now what? Okay. So I got more and more comfortable with it, started to go the process of, okay, if I want to try to teach people this, I need to find some way to do it properly. So I became a life coach. Public speaking is something I've done a lot of with other business I've done. I used to be a sports nutrition coach. I used to work with teams and did a lot of presentations from that perspective, plus being a teacher. Obviously, I taught in classrooms. So I started to do that realm and found that I was getting a very positive response from the audiences that I had started to meet. And then by that September, I'd kind of put a whole presentation concept together, started working with Schizophrenia Society in Regina, doing presentations with their groups to show that a diagnosed mental health condition that people have relates very closely to someone who has trauma. Like there's a lot of the same techniques, and a lot of the different ways that you deal with it are very, very similar. And one of the reasons they like me presenting with them to show that connection. That just because you don't have a mental health condition doesn't mean you don't battle with mental health issues. Trauma, divorce, a death in the family, death of somebody near who's close to you, all creates a significant amount of issues in people's lives. How do you deal with that? It's okay not to be okay, is one of the expressions that we use quite a bit. Everyone goes through this. You don't go through life and not have stress. Everybody has this happen in some form. It may not be a trauma as severe as mine, but it could be something else that happens, something else you witness. It could be something a family member goes through that then directly impacts you. Dealing with somebody who's an alcoholic adds stress to your life. It creates an impact on your mental health. So you need to have ways of dealing with that so that you can get through life and not have a collapse, not drop into an anxiety issue, panic attacks, not having depression, right? All these things that can happen if you let them. You control your own mind. You control how your mind works. So go out and find those tools that are helpful to you so that you can get through those struggles and come out the other side stronger.
Yeah. And you touched on, so your book is out now. And by the way, I just want to let listeners know that your book is called Driving Out of Darkness, Self-Care Strategies for Trauma Recovery. And you can find that in the show notes as well. So I'll just let them know that now. But you mentioned, so your book is out and there was this fear that now this is public, there may be this negative backlash, you may be labeled. And very often that keeps not just men, but also women from speaking out, from sharing their story, from connecting with others, because there is this fear of what happens next. So what happened for you, and how did you move through that fear and the fear of what could come next into more of a healing path? How did that unfold for you?
I am okay was one of the biggest things I had to tell myself. It's that I am okay. Like, this is something that's not unique. No experience anyone has on this planet. There's how many billions of people in this world, right? Nothing we experience is unique. And people get the thought that, well, people don't understand because they never experienced what I've been through. There is somebody who's experienced worse. Fact. What I went through is nothing compared to somebody who's been in a war. I look at it from that perspective, that I will find people who can relate to what I've been through and who will understand, who then can help me to get through some of the stuff I've been through. So I've been able to go through and really understand how my mindfulness and how my brain works. One of the things I learned very early on is that I control how my mind reacts, not the other way around. My mind doesn't control me. All the squirrely mind, all the monkey mind, as a lot of people will call it, will cause a lot of issues because your brain is trying to protect you. The reptilian brain that we have was designed way back when humans originally evolved. The reptilian, well, it's part of the brain that actually links with reptiles when we evolved, right? It's how it got its name. And it's designed to protect you. So when I went through a traumatic experience, my brain is always trying to protect me from something like that happening again because it sees it as a threat. And that's just how it works. But I can control that on how it reacts because I have a conscious mind. So one of the things I had to learn is now how to control my subconscious mind. If you go to bed and you go to sleep, in the last 5 minutes before you fall asleep, whatever you thought about is what your subconscious mind will work on the entire 8-9 hours of your sleep, or however long you sleep. You wake up in the morning, it's been working on that. So if you want to solve a problem, give it that. I've woken up at 2-3 in the morning with a solution to a problem by doing that. And it works quite nicely. But it also can have a detriment that if I'm thinking about the accident, thinking about this guy dying, thinking about the things that I saw and heard, I wake up in the morning in a panic. That was an issue, a big one. I can't start my day in a panic because my day just goes shot to hell in a handbasket. It's really tough. So I learned how to control my mind at night, 5 minutes before bedtime, basically. That time frame, really quick meditation, mindfulness, being grateful for something from my day. Proven in research, you cannot be grateful for something in your day and have a negative attitude at the same time. Can't do it. They're yin and yang. They're opposites. So I'm always grateful for something in my day and always concentrating on the positive things from my day before I fall asleep. Get up in the morning. I avoid social media. I avoid the news. I avoid the radio. I avoid TV, newspapers. All of it's so filled with negativity, derails me in my day. So I avoid all those. I get up, go to my quiet space that I've set up, and my little Zen room, if you want to call it. And I meditate. I meditate on my mindfulness. I meditate on doing affirmations, things about that will pump my mind up to, yes, I am okay. Yes, I am good at things. Here are the things I'm good at. Here are the things I'm going to do today. Today is going to be a great day. It goes into my journal and I explain why. I write down 3 to 5 things here. Here's why my day today is going to be really, really good. And I always start my day in a very positive mindset so I don't get derailed before it even begins. From there, then I start looking at perspective in my day. One of the bigger issues I had was driving, obviously. So how do I then change my perspective on things? Overreacting to anything is like a trigger. It sets me right back to that accident feeling again. So how do I control triggers? I control my own mind. Somebody cuts me off in traffic. What do you tend to do? You flip on the bird, you scream, you honk your horn, and you yell in your car, and you get pissed off. Sometimes you tail them, you hassle them. All those sorts of things happen, right? But I stopped doing that. I would always react because I was always fearful of getting into an accident. My reptilian brain trying to protect me, being fearful of getting into an accident, right? So what I ended up doing is I would do the opposite. I'd wave. It's okay. You're good. And wave them on. Have a good day. And not get upset at anybody who suddenly cut me off in traffic or somebody did something stupid, and let it go. And I started doing that with other parts of my life. Something triggers me. Somebody has an opinion about something I was doing at work and sends me some nasty email. It's okay. You're entitled to an opinion. It doesn't mean it's right. I still have value. I still am doing my job to the best of my ability. Just because your opinion is I didn't, that's just your opinion. It doesn't need to be mine. So I let it go. Learned how to train myself to have a different perspective on things in my life to stop the trigger from happening so that I was always staying in a positive light. And that helped tremendously for me to stop the triggers. Did a neurolinguistic programming to do the mental piece, the visualization and talking to myself to be able to see the accident and not have the reaction. I can say all the details of the accident here, still have a little bit of that emotion that's there, but it doesn't trigger me to increase my blood pressure and increase those feelings, right? So I'm able to now use a lot of my mindset, my mindfulness to be able to get through the triggers and not have the negative reaction.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like a few things happened there. So one was that you're working very hard to live in the present and the present moment, and you're letting go a lot of other things around that. And two, you were able to separate the traumatic event and the attached emotion a little bit. And although that may never fully entirely happen because it's obviously something that you experienced, but it sounds like there was a degree to where we can separate that to a point where, as you said, we don't get triggered all the time in a very grand emotional scale when we think of that, or we get triggered in some way. So it sounds like you have done a lot of work over the past few years since the accident happened to come into that space. And how are things for you today? I know that we touched on this a little bit before we did the recording, because I hear a lot that people think they have to move on from trauma, they have to get healed, and sort of this 1 year seems to be the magic number where people have to feel better and be better. So how is that for you today, looking back over the few years that the accident has happened now in the past? Where are you at today, and what have you learned about that healing process and the time it should take? And I put should in the quotation marks here.
Yeah, should. It's been 2.5 years. And from some people I talk to, they're going, it was that recent and you're okay? Is the question. And yes, I am okay. I am okay with what happened because it's now become a part of who I am. I'm not trying to use hypnotherapy to hide it. Some people go through hypnosis and try to take that memory and try to bury it. It will come back. I don't care how good somebody is at hypnosis. If you think you could just bury it and it'll never affect you again, that's just not reality. For me, I look at it from the perspective of this happened to me is something that I have now resolved for myself, that this is a part of who I am. This happened, and I can't ignore that fact. I use it for my own benefit for the most part now. And one of the things that I've learned very clearly is that journey from where I am, from the accident going forward, that is a journey, and it will continue to be a journey. And I will continue to be affected in different ways by what happened. There will always be people who will have some negative attitude towards it that, well, if it had been me, I would have just avoided the guy. Okay, that's fine. It's your opinion, but laws of physics state that that was impossible and it wasn't going to happen. As we dug into some of it, part of my healing journey was coming to the understanding from the evidence that we had that the accident was not caused by me. I was never to blame. he was committing suicide. He forced that accident to happen. So I was never going to be able to avoid it. So that's part of it, is that where's the blame? Like, somebody's trying to always blame somebody. I wasn't to blame. Do I blame him for his stature in life and that he had to do that? No. Laying blame on that just adds negative fuel to that fire. Will I ever be completely happy? No. There's always going to be struggles. People have struggles going through their lives. You're always going to come in across something that's going to happen that's suddenly going to send you into a tailspin. It's a learning journey. It's learning how to adapt. It's learning how to have the resources and the tools to be able to adapt to every little thing that can happen that's suddenly going to be a struggle. We have struggles. It's part of being human. If you think you're going to suddenly get to a utopia at the end where it's like, I'm finally gotten through everything, I've dealt with everything, my life is truly completely happy and nothing's going to affect me now, that's not even realistic. It doesn't happen for anyone. You see these people you think are truly happy. You see all the movie stars on TV. You think, oh, that person is truly happy. They have all the money, all the fame, everything that they've got, but you don't see the real them. You don't see the other side. You see Robin Williams, who you look at, the guy's got a fantastic career. He's extremely well known, extremely loved. He battled a demon that was so bad, he eventually took his own life. And that's not uncommon. People hide it, right? What you see, what you perceive of somebody being very happy, they could very well be extremely miserable and be riding that line where they're looking at taking their own life. You don't see that. They hide it. So the perception that you'll be at someday at X point of time, I'm going to be happy, I'm going to be through this, it's different for everybody. Like for me, it took 2.5 years to this point. I can say a year after the accident, I was well on my way to letting people know, being happier with what happened and being more resolved with it, but I was nowhere near done. I'm 2.5 years from then, I'm still not finished. I'm still working on some things from that. And it's always going to be that journey. Somebody could go through 5 years of heavy therapy with a psychologist, a counseling, and be to the point that I was in 1 year. You don't know. Everybody's a little bit different. Everybody reacts a little differently. To put a timestamp on it isn't realistic because the journey is different for each person. It's how you deal with yourself during that journey that becomes the critical piece. Can you manage what's happening? It's more of a management and doing self-care and trying to deal with things on a daily basis to be better each day and get a little bit more comfortable with those tools, to be a little bit better at being able to manage your mindfulness, managing your mind. And the better you get at using your tools, the easier it is to be able to manage your stress, to be able to manage how your brain works. And the better you get at that, the happier you will be as you go through. Even if it's something a little bit more major that happens, you have the tools to be able to manage it, manage your mind so that you don't do a collapse.
Yeah, and you mentioned an important part before as well of that is to pick those small moments of being grateful, because eventually those become some of the smaller stepping stones that will take you forward. And I don't think we ever get over things that happen like that because they inevitably become part of us and part of our experience here in this life. But we can, like you said, learn to manage. We can learn to have that be part of us and still live and still find those moments of being grateful, and maybe even taking those experiences like you have and sharing them and trying to find the purpose of this happened. How can I use this to do some good with that? So yeah, it's fascinating. And thank you for sharing all of that with us today. And you said you qualified as a life coach and you are doing work with that. Is there any way that our listeners can connect with you? Any services that you offer at this point, or is that still in the future?
As far as official programs and things of that nature, I will be. My life coaching is starting to ramp up. I'm going to have a membership site. We'll have resources and recommended readings. And I was a voracious reader for a year. where I looked at personal development. I read 56 books in 1 year to look at, okay, what resources are there that I can use for me and then be able to recommend to others. So that is all coming. Driving Out of Darkness is the name of my book. It's also how you find me on social media, both TikTok, Instagram. I have people reach out to me in direct messaging in both. And I have a website, drivingoutofdarkness.com as well, which has some resources that attach to people who have bought my book. There's links there for that as well through Amazon, Barnes & Noble in the States. Amazon's around the world, so it's easy to buy anywhere in the world for those who want to purchase it. And get a hold of me. If you have a question, you have something you're struggling with, I don't charge to respond to DMs. I have no issue. I will talk to anybody who's looking to get some help from me. It's not going to be like a huge amount of my time because times is an issue for me at times, no pun intended. But yeah, I have no issue talking to people who need a little bit of help. They want an idea of, okay, so where do I go to try to find a men's group? Where do I go to find a support group? I have people I've been in communication with who I work with. I have one lady who's from here in the city. Her 17-year-old daughter died in a car accident. So she has a support group for grieving mothers who have lost a child. There's those kinds of resources that I have been able to tap into to help others find the people they need to talk to who have a similar experience. There's lots of people out there. There's lots of connections that I have that I can help people with. If you're looking to try to connect, by all means, reach out to me on the social media channels off of my website, just the contact form. By all means, get a hold of me and I'll help in any way I can. I'll help anyone who asks for it.
Thank you so much for that. And we, of course, will be linking to all of Jacques' offerings in the show notes as well. So you can check there on where you can find his book, how you connect with him on the website, on the socials, and we'll make sure we put all of that there so you can reach out. And if you have questions and you may be in a space that he was in a few years ago where you're afraid or something has happened, you don't know how to share, what the first steps are, make sure that you reach out and you ask those questions, because it will make a world of difference if you can make that first step happen. And this has been another incredible episode, and I really hope our listeners have found value in what we have talked about today. They've maybe connected with your story if they've had an experience, a traumatic experience themselves. And thank you so much for coming on today in your very early morning hours and sharing your story with us. I truly appreciate it. And I really appreciate you being vulnerable and putting yourself out there so that other people can see what that means to move through that and to move forward from an experience like that. So thank you so much, Jacques, for being here today and sharing.
Well, thanks very much for having me on. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was my pleasure as well. And take really great care of yourself.
Yeah, you as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Journey podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Journey on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejourney.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.